Dear colleagues of IRPA, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I am here to make a presentation on this topic that has been hot in IRPA for a number of years, the difference between the protection against ionizing radiations and protection against non-ionizing radiation. There are obviously different approaches, and many people have been very concerned of this. In particularly, my friend R.Touzet, which is a real expert in the field, I am presenting this on behalf of him, and you know that non-ionizing radiation is not my specialty, but I believe that I know the principles of against ionizing radiation, and I present the position of Rodolfo in many of these issues. The content of my presentation, it will include a background, a discussion on consensual science, on the universal paradigm on protection, on the intergovernmental regime that we have, and on provision for practical application, ending with an epilogue. Let's talk with the background. Many associated societies constituting IRPA are convinced of the benefit of an international and intergovernmental radiation safety system. We know that for a number of years, we are using this for a number of years. The basic ingredients of an international and intergovernmental radiation safety system is that it should be universal and consensual, be founded in international science, be based on a universal paradigm, result in an intergovernmental regime of standards and conventions, and include provision for practical application from international professional societies. These are the ingredients, namely consensual science, universal recognized paradigm, intergovernmental regime of standards, and provision for practical applications. Thousands of professionals constituting IRPA benefit from such a system, but just for ionizing radiation, not for non-ionizing radiation. The International Radiation Safety System for ionizing radiation is one of the most significant international and intergovernmental successes. You know that this, again, universal and consensual, founded on the accepted science by unscared, based on the IRPA universal paradigm, resulted in an intergovernmental regime of a standard co-sponsored by all relevant international agencies under the aegis of the IAEA, but they're all of them, and enforced by conventions among states, such as the ILO Convention, and include provision for practical application from all relevant agencies and IRPA. The consensual science, the universal paradigm, the intergovernmental standard and convention, and the provisions for applications are provided by unscared, by IRPA, by all the international agencies which are relevant, and the provision for application by these agencies with the help of IRPA. This is the regime for ionizing radiation. But what about non-ionizing radiation? For NIR, a comparable system does not appear to exist. That is the reality. There is a proxy, which is the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, was created by us because we were worried about that. It was done in Montreal. I was in that IRPA meeting to continue the work of a previous committee in IRPA, the International Non-Ionizing Radiation Committee, showing the interest of IRPA in solving this problem. It was done for advancing NIR protection for the benefit of people and the environment, for the recent real interest of IRPA in this subject. There is a relationship between IRPA and IRPA. IRPA shall submit his formal recommendation on protection against NIR for comment by the IRPA Executive Council and the IRPA societies prior to publication. Probably I missed something, but this never happened to me, and I am a member of a national organization and I feel part of IRPA. I believe that many people can say the same. Moreover, IRPA shall contribute an annual grant for ICNLP. Whether it's small or big is a different issue. Is that each one of us, you, me, etc., all of us, we are contributing to our national societies, national society to IRPA, and IRPA to NIR. Therefore, we are contributing to NIRPA. What about the consensual science, therefore? Unscared provide this consensual science for international radiation at the top level of international governance. The General Assembly 193 states. The relationship summarized by Anskear to this organization is a relationship between probability and dose, as you know very well, for non-ionizing radiation, which distinguish three clear areas: the area of clinically observable effect on individuals, the area of statistically observable effect in populations, and the area of the effects are biological plausible. And the regulations are on this area, in the area where they are biological plausible. This is the relationship put it in the log paper. And here in the law area, we don't know exactly what happened, but we take a very prudent attitude. The so-called and criticized LNT is a model, it's not an hypothesis, it's a model that above natural background dose, above natural background incidence effects, an increment of those will produce a nominal increment of likely local effects that you know that has a nominal risk around 5% per sievert, 0.005% per millisievert, extremely low, but we are protecting against this nominal risk, not demonstrated risk. The criteria for cancer risk of NIR are completely different. I mean, it's a graph in which data of humans and animals are mixed. There are no relationships, at least that we know, a criteria on these relationships. And therefore, this has been summarized in a note for an IRPA with critical evaluations of some study that has been done. And there are fundamental divergences. For instance, the use, National Toxicology Program and the Ramazzini Institute basically conclude that that appear to be carcinogenic, the NIRS, and IRPA concluded the opposite. That they said that preclude conclusions being drawn concerning radiofrequencies and carcinogenesis. So there is different divergences, not only lack of consensus, there are divergences. Well, how to build an universal accepted paradigm for NIR if this is not an international consensus science to support it? This is a basic question. Let's go to the universal paradigm. The paradigm of IRPA, very well known, is based on publication 103 with basic principle of protections. You know that there are three: justification of decision, optimization of protection, restriction of individual dose, and there is one implicit that the international standard has made that explicit: the protection of future generation of the environment. And this based on very solid ethical foundations. We describe these ethics in the IRPA in Glasgow with individual-oriented ethics, society-oriented ethics, the deontological ethic based on duty, the arete ethic based on virtue, the teleological ethic based on consequence, the utilitarian ethic based on utility, which a clear separation here with individual-related and societal-related ethics. These are the doctrines, the basic doctrines on ethics with the few words that describe these ethics. And for each one of these ethics, the IRPA has a principle. Justification, optimization, are based on ethics. And from these ethics, the core values of the RA system has been derived and published by the IRPA. Beneficence of non-malignancy, prudence, justice, and dignity. These are clear publications. Well, and there is what we call a Rubik cube of ionizing radiation, dividing workers, public, patients, planned existing and emergency exposure, justification, optimization, individual restrictions. This is the paradigm for international ionizing radiation. And IRPA made an effort to try to apply the same paradigm in this statement that was published last year. And this is very much welcome because the statement is welcome. It basically said that the general principle for NIR protection are based upon the well-established principle of IRPA and the underpinning ethical values published by IRPA. Now, this is a very nice declaration that we support very much, but it's not clear how this declaration is implemented in practice. That is the real problem. And for instance, the justification principle both put the same principle. Any decision that alters radiation exposure situation should do more good than harm. But then it needed make a proviso that do not explicitly address social and economic issues, because they said that this is the remit of relevant authority. How you can apply the justification principle without addressing these issues? Optimization. ICRP is very clear, best protection under prevailing circumstances. INIRPs declare that when things are well below the thresholds, they will apply. What means the threshold? I mean, there is no threshold at low doses. And they said optimization is not necessary. Therefore, these provisions are complicated. I mean, make the thing unclear. On the principle of limitation, ICRP limits individual exposure for restricting inferred risk for a stochastic effect. Risks that we believe that are there. But in SNPs declare that the exposure is limited to either below the level with an accepted risk for adverse effect or below the threshold level for adverse health effect. This creates confusion, gives the feeling that the limit is very near the threshold for very big effects. And on the future of the environment, ICRP is very clear. ICRP limits those commitments and not those incurred. And the environment, it said, must also be protected for maintaining biological diversity, ensuring the conservation of species, protecting the health and status of the natural habitat, communities, and the ecosystem. What is the position of the NIRP on this, on future environment? At least I don't know. I mean, not clear, or I could not find in this NIRP documentation a position. And let's move to an intergovernmental regime. You know that there is a regime with fundamental safety principles accepted by all parties, all relevant organizations, all of them, which are exactly the principles, include the principles recommended by ICRP, exactly. And this leads to a plethora of international standards, hundreds of very detailed international standards that are published by the IAEA, but they're co-sponsored by all the United Nations system. And conventions. This is an example, just the ILO convention, but there, as you know, there are many conventions which put obligations on the state on radiation protection against ionizing radiation. There is therefore a very solid system for ionizing radiation. Conventions, fundamentals, requirements, and guidelines. Really a very solid system. What is the intergovernmental system and standard and convention for NIS? I don't know. I don't know any similar system. And then the provision for practical applications are very clear. For ionizing radiations, it's a very solid system of providing technical assistance, fostering information exchange, promoting education and training, coordinating research and development, rendering appraisal services. And this is done with the support of IRPA, of us, of the professionals. What are the provisions for the practical application of radiation safety to NIR? I don't know. At least I am not aware, and I believe that it's not clear, at least, let me put it that way. By epilogue, it seemed to be essential for IRPA, namely for us, for the societies, and for the plethora of radiation protection professionals like you and like me, to search for an unequivocal and unambiguous answer to the question presented in this paper. Really, we believe Rodolfo has been putting a lot of pressure on this, and really, I believe that he's right. I am talking on his behalf. Because NIR is in the remit of IRPA. Sorry. IRPA was conscious of some of these problems and duly created INIR 30 years ago. IRPA requested INIR to be kept duly informed. Since the IRPA society has been kept quasi in limbo on such basic questions and what is the international consensus, what is the rational ethic, what is the intergovernmental regime, what are the provisions for the global application of such a standard, I believe that we want, is very reason to request answer to this question. The time is ripe. The time is ripe for closing the gate. Thank you for your tolerance, and here you have the address of Rodolfo and telephone, and if you call us, we will certainly provide you with the relevant information used in this presentation.